Now, the banking sector in Nigeria is feeling the strains of COVID-19 pandemic alongside their clients, their employees, and the societies they serve.
Well, although banks are not being hit directly as other retail institutions, they are definitely at the forefront of public attention because of their financial services.
Very well said. Due to the impact of the disease, laying off staff becomes a front burner in this conversation about banks. But for swift intervention of the Bankers Committee of Nigerian Central Bank, the discussion was put to rest in a directive issued by CBN Director of Corporate Communications, Isaac Okorafo, who said that after a meeting of Bankers Committee to review the effect of the coronavirus on the banking industry, it also agreed that the banks need the express approval of the CBN to lay off any staff, and this in order to help minimize and mitigate the negative effect of the COVID-19 pandemic on families and livelihoods, says the committee.
Well, joining us now to look at the impact of COVID-19 on the Nigerian banking industry is Bayo Olugbemi, the incoming president, chairman of council, the Chartered Institute of Bankers of Nigeria, CIBN. Thank you so much, Mr. Olugbemi, for joining us this morning on the morning show here on Arise News.
Thank you very much for having me this morning.
Great. So coronavirus is bringing a new normal with it, and the banking sector, as we are seeing, is not exempted. In fact, on Monday, when we eased the lockdown in two states and Federal Capital Territory, Lagos, Ogun, and Abuja, as well as across the country, really, we saw that the banks were not ready, or they underestimated the reopening with the abnormality that we saw at the various banks. But tell me, really, how much of a disruption has COVID-19 brought to the banking sector, and what do you envisage will happen in the coming months as regards the cost of running financial institutions?
Thank you very much. It is not a new thing that, all of us are aware that COVID-19 has done a lot of damage, not only to the banking sector or the financial services sector, but the economy generally, not only in Nigeria, but all over the world. That the banks were not prepared for the partial opening on Monday, I wouldn't say yes or no, but the fact remains that for people who have been locked down for 5 weeks, especially in Lagos, Ogun, and the Federal Capital Territory, one will expect that a lot of people will want to transact with their banks, and that was the reason why you saw that surge in depositors going to various banks to withdraw money, and especially since most of the bank branches were not open, so there was pressure on the few ones that were open. That notwithstanding, I believe after Monday, we've seen a lot of relaxation or ease in the number of people going to the banks to collect money, because there are digital channels that have been there available for people to use over the past weeks. As for the pressure on the staff, the pressure on the banks themselves, of course, it will continue in the next few weeks. For now, a lot of the banks, of course, they are obeying the rules of engagement released by the authorities as regards social distancing, as regards people that can be in the office at any point in time. So definitely, a lot of us are still working from home, and of course, because of that, there will be a lot of increase, especially with your data, internet, use of other channels. So definitely there will be a rise in some areas in terms of costs to servicing the customers.
Right. If I should say congratulations to you first, the incoming president of a very noble organization that's had the likes of Alhaji Femi Sule and other great bankers. But I want to ask you this. I want to talk about loans. Very important point. A couple of banks have come out to say, okay, we'll give moratorium on a couple of loans out there. But small business owners want this because of the economic impasse. Just about a month, the economy of the country has been on standstill due to coronavirus. I mean, is there sort of like going to be a consensus? Is this something you're going to discuss at CIBN, at the Banker's House, as your headquarters is famously called, right there around Adeola Hopewell, that the banks should help a great deal to ease out the moratorium of the payment of these loans in return? GTB has done the first work as regards. I don't know what others are doing.
Thank you very much for the congratulatory message or wishes. As for CIBN and the banks, let me make a clarification. CIBN is a professional institute certifying bankers and other financial experts to work in the financial services industry. We don't regulate banks. Regulation is done by the Central Bank of Nigeria. And I tell you, CBN has taken the lead in releasing some stimulus packages for SMEs, for the medical industry, and so on and so forth, with lower interest rates, as low as 5%. And of course, ditto the other development financial institutions like BOI and DBN, they follow suit. So in that wise, I believe the banks will take a cue, and I believe also that the Bankers Committee, which comprises MDs of banks, the CBN, the NDIC, and so on, they will come to terms with that fact. And I think with what GTB has said, I believe other banks are also going to make some releases. I believe so, because the regulator of the industry, CBN, has taken a lead in doing that. And of course, one of the stimulus packages is, I think, a 50 billion MSMEs stimulus package released by CBN to NISRA, and that is also to ease the lower rung of the economy, the MSMEs. So I believe in the long run, most of the banks will look at the issue of moratorium, they will look at the issue of interest reduction, and so on and so forth, to ensure that the economic activities is not grounded.
I have two quick questions for you. Let's start with the implementation of digitized and remote bank transactions. Like Adesuwa rightfully mentioned, at the beginning of this week, when there was an ease in the lockdown, we did begin to see a lot of people crowded around banking institutions because they wanted to deposit money or withdraw money. So my question to you is, has the banking sector done enough to make sure that we are ensuring cashless transactions in such a time as this, that we have fewer people having to go into the banks? And then my second question to you is even about the spread of said notes. It's even in Korea, the Bank of Korea did come out to say that there's a possibility of COVID-19 being spread on the distribution of notes, and WHO as well substantiated that statement. So my question to you is, is there a possibility of us being able to quarantine our notes? Because the more people touch these notes or use it to do transactions, that in itself might be a spread of COVID-19.
Thank you very much. I will start from the second question, the issue of banknotes as a carrier of COVID-19. I think CBN had mentioned some weeks ago, if I can remember, that they ensure that notes that goes to the banking industry should be properly disinfected. And I think I had one of the bank CEOs recently at a webinar talking about their bank ensuring that they sanitize or decontaminate their banknotes. So I think CBN in the long run, we advise, and I believe the banks too, we as much as possible ensure that notes to be given out to the public are properly sanitized or decontaminated or quarantined before they are given out. That said, your first question on digitization, I want to let you know this, that Nigerian economy is majorly a cash economy, unfortunately. But most banks over the years have gone digital. In fact, I would say most financial institutions have gone digital in the past years, and we have seen a lot of traction. A lot of transactions are done on each channel, on digitization, on digital channels. And for example, the past 5 weeks that the economy has been locked down fully, especially in Lagos, Ogun, and FCT, billions of transactions have taken place through digital means. So it is not the banks that are not ready. I think it's the nature of our economy in Nigeria being a cash economy. That's the problem. But I believe over the years, this will change, especially with the reality of COVID-19. And you know also that the banking industry has embraced what they call agency banking, that make banking transaction or transaction with banks to be brought to the lower level, the local governments, the remote areas. And with agency banking also, you can use your ATMs, you can use your POS, and of course you can pay, and you don't have to go to the bank these days to actually make deposits. You can do it through the agent banks. But by and large, over the years, I believe Nigerians, especially with the reality of COVID-19, will fully embrace digital banking.
Indeed, and that brings me to my question of financial inclusion. Because as COVID-19 has again exposed or highlighted, is the gap between the banked and unbanked Nigerians when the government decided to share palliatives, especially financial palliatives, and decided to use BVNs. Then you consider those who are not unbanked and who don't even have BVN. Is that something the CIBN will be taking into consideration and scaling up under your reign? And just how important is this?
Thank you very much. Talking about agency banking and talking about taking the banks to every remote area of Nigeria, CIBN has been in the forefront, working with the CBN and other banks. You know SANEF. SANEF principally was promoted, and maybe we provided the secretariat, that's CIBN, to SANEF for many months before eventually it took off. And the purpose is for banking to be easy or made easy for everyone, whether they are in the upper rung of the economy or the lower rung. And I think that will continue. It will be a continuous engagement between CIBN, the CBN, and the Bankers Committee to continue to penetrate the hinterlands of Nigeria. And I think we have achieved a lot. I know of a bank that has over 150,000 or so agent banks. And that's the purpose is for us to make sure that banking services goes to the rural areas. And I think we are continuing and will continue to engage and discuss this.
All right, Al, we're going on a quick break now. So we'll take the break, and I'll come back to ask you some questions as regards this and as we proceed with this interview. If the break is rife, we could take it now, but if it's not timely, all right, we'll go on the break real quickly, and we'll come back to have more conversation as regards this and just take the line of questioning on. But as soon as, if the break is rife, all right, welcome back. Still the morning show right here on the Rise News, and we're talking to Bayo Olugbemi, the incoming president and chairman of Council, the Chartered Institute of Bankers of Nigeria, CIBN. Right, real quickly, 2 points I wanted to raise. I know you have a background in investment banking. This is not a great time for investment, really, as regards the banking sector. What would you like to say about that? And secondly, would you start putting in place, hazard understanding courses for the bankers you are training at CIBN? Because nobody predicted coronavirus was going to come. Nobody could postulate that it was going to come and affect the banking sector and the oil sector and other sectors. So is that something you'll be thinking of in the long run, how bankers can react when unforeseen hazards come? And secondly, investment climate now in Nigeria. Thank
you very much. One of the major aspects of banking or life generally is about risk. And I know that the bankers that we train and that we continue to train, issue of risk management is always and will always be in the front burner. And yes, nobody can predict what comes, what becomes of tomorrow, but then we can peep into the future, and normally we try as much as possible. I mean, there will be risks, and there are risks, but what we do is to leverage on the mitigants that one should put in place to ensure that risks are minimized. So, yes, nobody predicted COVID-19. Nobody knew it would come. It's a natural phenomenon. But then, I know banks generally prepare for such eventualities, and they will have put one or two things in place to ensure that when they come, we take it in its right and ensure that we minimize the effect on our operation. And as for training, of course, like I said, we continue to train people on risk management, risk mitigation, and so on and so forth. The issue of investment banking, not just now, in the past few years, the investment banking climate in Nigeria has been taking a hit, especially with foreign direct investment and foreign portfolio investment. It's been in and out, more or less. And if you look at the capital market, there hasn't been any major public offering in the past few years, except with the listing of MTN and Airtel last year. And those ones were not actually a public offering for MTN. It was just a listing of existing shareholders on the floor of the stock exchange. Whereas Airtel actually was Airtel Africa that raised money all over Africa and listed here and in the UK. So direct foreign investment has been dealt with, so to say, and even in the run to the COVID-19, because of the oil market crash, a lot of foreign portfolio investors have actually been withdrawing from Nigeria. So what is the future of investment in Nigeria? It is tough to call, but one thing is sure, that money follows where it is properly and judiciously used. Money follows where they will get adequate return on their investment. So you wouldn't blame any investor who is exiting investment in Nigeria for now or any part of the world. But one thing is sure, that the fundamentals, especially of 2019, of most of the companies listed on the stock exchange in Nigeria, the banking industry in particular, I mean, in the past 4 or 5 weeks, we've seen results from the banking industries. Those are listed on the stock exchange with good, fairly good returns on investment. And even the market has taken a rally in the past few weeks. Instead of, contrary to what you would have expected that the market would be going down, the past 5 weeks, the market has actually been steadily going up. So that shows that despite COVID-19, people still have faith in the Nigerian capital market, especially with the fundamentals that have been strong. The likes of GTB, the likes of First Bank, the likes of Zenith, Access Bank, they've released their results for 2019. And even the first quarter result for 2020 has been fairly good. And I believe, yes, COVID-19 will, in a way, affect us, but I believe the investment climate will still, in a way, be able to wait through it.
I mean, you have spoken about foreign investment. So my next question to you is the impact on the Forex markets, especially in direct relation to banking fees and trading income. The Forex markets, foreign exchange, let's talk about that. What's the impact of it?
Before COVID-19, there has been some heat on the foreign exchange market. Why? Because our major earning, Nigerian major earning, is from oil. And oil and gas has been badly hit. I mean, from the high of about $70 per barrel, we have been experiencing something in the region of $20 and $30, which means more than 50% of our foreign earners has gone. So with that, definitely there will be pressure on FX, and there has been pressure. I mean, proud to January, February this year, we've maintained a constant rate of 360 to $1, 360, 365, even in the black market, so to say, or parallel market, as it is said, and other windows. But now, even with that officially devaluing Naira, it has devalued itself. So there is pressure on the foreign exchange. The rate has gone up, or has depreciated, so to say. Now you hear about 450, about 460, and thereabout per dollar, Naira per dollar. So definitely the banks too will be affected in terms of earnings from FX.
Indeed, well, talking about pressure, job losses and job cuts are almost inevitable in every sector you turn to, aviation, tourism, and even the banks. But thankfully, here in Nigeria, the CBN has stepped in to avert any job losses, giving that assurances. But let me ask you, are those assurances enough? And beyond those assurances, can the Apex Bank be looking at perhaps the LDR and the CRR for the banks, for them to stay afloat? What's your take?
Thank you very much. When you say the regulator CBN most times don't take unilateral decisions. We have what we call the Bankers Committee with CBN at the Apex. NDIC is involved, and all banks, MDs, and CEOs. And I believe that most of the policy statements you've heard and you will hear concerning the banking sector were taken at Bankers Committee meetings. I mean, the past, since COVID-19, I heard they've met several times online, and they've taken some of these decisions. And the decision on banks not reducing their staff is a welcome decision, at least for now, that everybody's mind will be at rest. And I also believe that CBN governor or our regulator is a good listener. And when the Bankers Committee meets and discuss with him, I'm sure the issue of CRR and the rest will be looked into with a view to ensuring that more liquidity is available for the banks to use to either lend and to do other things.
Right. I mean, a very good point you've made about liquidity. We all know that currently as we speak, that's a big challenge in this economy owing to the dynamics we have now with crude oil prices going down, Bonny Lights quite down, Focados quite down in Nigeria. Are there any bufferings you want to ask for the banks, maybe by CBN, as regards it? Because these are very, very, very inexplicable times for the banks in Nigeria as we speak. Is there any more that you can ask that, the CBN should do for the banks as a regulator? And I also want you to chart a course for us as regards how your administration will be. Because it's quite a very checkered institution, CIBN. What is it going to be like? We've had lots of people, down the reins where you are. They have charted CIBN for the likes of Erastus Akingbola, the likes of Alhaji Femi Sule and the like. So what will your administration be? Just two questions. I'll start to wrap things up.
Thank you very much. The first one, I think I've answered partially, easing of CRR. And of course, liquidity ratio. I think, like I said, CBN is a listening regulator, and I believe by the time they are engaged by the operators, the banks themselves, there will be a lot of easing. And I mentioned earlier on that there are a lot of stimulus that they are some of these stimulus will also pass through the banking sector. So which means the banks will, in a way, make, if you like to use the word, some spread. If CBN says it's 5%, of course they will make their own commission here and there. So I think CBN is doing a lot, and they will still do much more. I mean, there has been a lot of stimulus packages that have been released by CBN, and most of them, like I said, will go through the banking sector. CBN cannot lend directly. Even the BOIs of this world, they don't lend directly. The DBN don't lend directly, they go through banks. So in a way, those stimulus packages will still go through the banking industry, and the banks will earn their fees from it. So it's a way of easing liquidity in the banking industry. As for our tenor, it's not a one-man business, it's a team business. And I can assure you that, yes, these are trying times, this is a challenging time, but we believe, God, that with the foundation that has been well built by our past leaders, you mentioned Papa late Alhaji Femi Sule, Alhaji Aoji Otiti, Papa Francis Ijewere, Erastus Akingbola, and in recent times, Otumba Oshibogun, Professor Ajibola, Mr. Lawe Jayola, and the rest of them, Sayemi and Co. And of course, our hardworking president, Dr. Uche Olowu. They've laid the solid foundation for us to build on, and I can assure you, we will build on it very solidly. And for example, we started a webinar series. We had one on Tuesday, and as I speak, one is going on now to ensure that the operators, the regulators, and even the customers that we serve are given foods for thoughts on how to go about running their businesses, how to go about running the banking industry, and how to go about running the economy in the COVID environment and post-COVID seasons to come.
We're going on a short break now. However, when we get back, I would like to ask you about the next steps CIBN is taking to make sure that we reduce this heightened risk of economic contraction. You're still watching The Morning Show here on Arise News. Join us again. Welcome back to The Morning Show here on Arise News. We are still discussing the impact of COVID-19 on the Nigerian banking industry with Mr. Bayo Olugbemi, the incoming president, a chairman of the Council of the Chartered Institute of Bankers of Nigeria, CIBN. Now, before the break, I was asking you, what steps can we begin to take to ensure that we are reducing this heightened risk of economic contraction?
Thank you very much. Of course, like I said earlier on, our economy is mono-product based, and since we have reduction in not just only in production quota and what we can produce, we also have contraction in terms of the price of oil, which has dropped by more than 50% against the budget. So definitely there will be contraction. But what we can do is something that we have preached over the years is diversification. We have to diversify our economy, and no longer lip service kind of thing, but we need to be intentional about it. We need to diversify into agriculture. We need to diversify into manufacturing. We need to diversify into technology and other areas where income can roll in. And for now, definitely there will be contraction because of the fact that our major income earner, foreign exchange earner, has been battered and has been dealt with. Unless price of oil increases, and in the short time, the contraction will continue. But in the long run, if we begin to look at other sectors, and I believe that this government in particular in the past 2 or 3 years, they've been looking at areas of agriculture in particular, rice production, wheat production, and so on and so forth. And I believe that if we intensify this, we'll be better for it in the long run.
All right, 2 questions. First, let me ask you, how has COVID-19 really affected your institutes, and what are the concerns you have concerning the financial sector as COVID-19 continues to disrupt our way of life? And secondly, how do you see the banks responding to struggling businesses, small businesses, post-COVID-19? Do you see any difference?
First and foremost, CIBN is a member organization. So whatever affects our members affects us indirectly. And that is why one is very happy with the decision of CBN and the Bankers Committee not, as much as possible, not to reduce staff in the banking industry. Because if our members are affected, CIBN will also be badly affected. But that notwithstanding, we as an organization, we are standing by the government. All the rules and regulations are being followed, not only at the CIBN level, but also the banks and the bankers. So we are working with the government, and we believe at the end of the day, we will win the battle over COVID-19. The second question again, please.
How do you see the banks responding to small businesses in particular post-COVID-19? Okay,
thank you very much. I mentioned earlier on that CBN is not taking their eyes away from helping the MSMEs, small businesses. And one of the reasons why they've given so much money to NISRA, which is the microfinance bank of government of CBN, is to ensure that the MSMEs are not pushed away, are not shortchanged in this period. So I think the 50 billion will go a long way to helping the SMEs. As for banks, most banks in Nigeria, commercial banks, have SMEs departments. We had to look at SMEs. But one thing is sure, no bank, and I mean no bank, we give you fund when the project you have brought is not bankable. If the project you brought is not the one that will bring back returns on investment. For example, it's no use giving money to a customer that you know from ab initio will default. Okay. Even with the money being given, with the stimuluses being given by CBN and co, the banks are still the risk takers. They take the risk. If anything happens, the bank have to return the money back. So you want to profile the people you want to deal with before you deal with them.
Okay, real quickly, I want to come in here. There's a case of a lot of banks that are exposed to loans for people in the oil and gas sector. With what has happened now, the price of oil going down, are we sure about the repercussion of this? A lot of banks, underline a lot of banks, are exposed to loans in the oil and gas sector. I want you to talk about that quickly as we wrap up.
I think the exposure is about 30-31%. And as banks, of course, you are encouraged to lend to every sector of the economy. In fact, there was a time that the banks were, I don't want to use the word compel, to lend to the power industry. And so also, because the oil and gas industry was thriving, most banks lend to them. But one thing I want to believe is there's no bank that will lend to this industry without taking adequate precautions, adequate risk assessment, and risk profiling before they did. And I want to believe that there are mitigants that have been put in place even before lending. But definitely, this oil and gas industry sector customers will be challenged. I think what the bank may have to do in the long run is to renegotiate and restructure the repayment plans of the industry exposure.
Quite a very, very, challenging one there. But I'd like to say a very big thank you to you as you start your administration and your reign in this capacity. And we wish you all the very best. And as you go on this journey, like they say, break a leg, all right?
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
I appreciate it.
Thank you so much.